Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom, and I'm honored to serve as First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's senior minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you're bringing in with you today and all your heart longs to set down. We'd like to pay a special welcome to guests joining us this morning. If you're visiting for the first time or joining us from afar, why don't you say hello in the chat now and tell us where you're joining from. I welcome everyone into our worship service by inviting you to repeat our first church mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Our opening words this morning are the poem Essential Gratitude by Andrea Podos. Essential gratitude. Sometimes it just stuns you like an arrow flung from some angel's wing. Sometimes it hastily scribbles a list in the air. Black coffee, thick new books, your pillow's cool underside, the quirky family you married into. It is content with so little, really, even the ink of your pen along the watery lines of your dime store notebook could be a swiftly moving prayer. Let's go now to our beloved sanctuary to light the chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
Good morning. My name is Paul Kosadowski, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. I'd like to share a poem with you. It's a poem about joy and how it can materialize in the most simple surroundings and how it can coexist in mysterious ways with sadness. It's called First Song, and it's by the American poet Galway Kinnell. Then it was dusk in Illinois. The small boy, after an afternoon of carting dung, hung on the rail fence, a sapped thing, weary to crying. Dark was growing tall, and he began to hear the pond frogs all calling on his ear with what seemed their joy. Soon their sound was pleasant for the boy, listening in the smoky dusk and the nightfall of Illinois. And from the fields, two small boys came bearing cornstalk violins, and they rubbed the cornstalk bows with rosins, and the three sat there scraping of their joy. It was now fine music the frogs and the boys did in the towering Illinois twilight make, and into the dark, in spite of a shoulder's ache, a boy's hunched body loved out of a stalk, the first song of his happiness. And the song woke his heart to the darkness and into the sadness of joy.
Family.
Community.
Basketball.
Laughing with people I love.
Rock climbing.
Children.
Rivers.
Music.
Being in nature.
Truth.
I've got nothing against you. I just want to be heard. Like every child, woman, and man in this big, beautiful world. I knew boys like you in high school. Thought if I ignored, you'd go away. But what I fear grows, what I resist persists. I need joy to be my best. How do I look on you with joy in my heart? Look on you with joy in my heart. I get up before the sunrise, look at the stars in the night sky. I breathe in and out slowly, letting my fears rise up out of me like smoke floating over the sea. I find the joy in my heart early, open my eyes to the birds and trees. I feel joy in my heart, joy in my heart, joy in the world, 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 joy in the world. I read the hiding place, lived through an arms race, knew at 4 I'd not retaliate against the bomb if up to me, 'cause then there'd be no place to be. Oh no, not a gun in every school, digging in the oceans for dirty fuel, backing out of what we agreed to, and I fear the worst. With joy in my heart, joy in my heart. The way you look at something changes things. The way you look at something changes things. The way you look at something changes things. So who you gonna be? How you gonna see? Some say it's mercy, others give hugs for free. Some try to get us to zero. Kids in New York from every land who don't know any different. They're laughing and holding hands while parents watch them play. With joy in their hearts, joy in their hearts, joy in the world. With joy in my heart, joy in the world, joy in my heart, joy in the world, joy in the world, joy in the world. I get up before the sunrise, look at the stars in the night sky. I breathe in and out slowly.
Thank you so much, Anne Heaton. That song is always such a pleasure, such a joy. In April of 2020, Max Fisher wrote an article for the New York Times column, The Interpreter, wondering what our first pandemic winter would feel like. Running into our second one here now, I noticed how my reactions this year are different than they were last year. The fear I was holding in my body last year was so much bigger, and my coping mechanisms were a lot more frantic. But back in April of last year, of 2020, Fisher was looking for answers, for a map, for a pathway to survival. And he found it in a surprising place, in joy. Fisher interviewed the artist Velibor Bosovic about Bosovic's experience living through the siege of Sarajevo in the 1990s. During the Bosnian War, Sarajevo was under siege for nearly 4 years, from April of 1992 to February of 1996. It was the longest siege in modern history. During those years, a little over 1% of the city's 425 residents were killed by violence. While the violence was sporadic, the threat of death became a part of life. The city was cut off from the rest of the world, and it was periodically without power. Restaurants and movie theaters closed. Similarly to our experience with the pandemic, daily life changed drastically, and it changed overnight. Velibor Bosovic was a soldier in the Bosnian army, so he held some responsibility for defending the city, but he was also a citizen of it. He lived in that city under siege every day. To add to the mix, his father was a prisoner of the Bosnian army that Bosovic was serving in and was being held somewhere else. Needless to say, it was a complicated and difficult time for Bosovic. When Max Fisher spoke with Bosovic about that time, trying to mine his experience for meaning and survival in pandemic losses and lockdowns, Bosovic surprised him by telling him his most prominent memories of the siege were memories of joy. He remembered really getting to know people in the place, the apartment building where he lived, and the people that he knew helping each other in new ways. He saw his friends and connected with them when he could, and he and his girlfriend got married during that time. He shared with Fisher one of his most prized possessions, a photo of himself with his friends playing pool by candlelight during one of the power outages that were common. That photo sits on the mantle of the home Bosovic now owns in Montreal. Fisher writes that Bosovic is not alone in holding fond memories of joy during the long siege of Sarajevo. Many others have shared moments of connection by candlelight or times watching VHS tapes at home with small groups of friends when there was electricity. In fact, those small group movie gatherings were so common and so beloved that Sarajevo developed, quote, a generation of film aficionados who, once the siege lifted, made Sarajevo the home of a still renowned film festival. Bosovic told Fisher, "When I remember the siege now, I always remember the good moments. We had some fun, because otherwise we would all go completely mad." Joy. It helps us make it through the hard stuff. It gives us the nourishment we need to keep going. Without reconnecting to joy, to gratitude for and celebration of life, our souls get eaten away by the pain. Pain is an inevitable part of living in a world that includes brokenness. So we need to consciously care for our souls with the tonic of joy. We need a balm for our souls in order to continue to face the pain of the world, let alone do the work of justice and truth and meaning. Joy is a spiritual practice, and it serves the well-being of our souls, but also our relationships, our churches, our movements, and the world. Joy causes physiological changes in the way that we experience our very bodies. It makes us feel lighter. It makes movement feel easier. It actually reduces pain. It makes us experience colors and smells more deeply and vividly. Joy also bonds us to other people. It helps us feel connected to other people, and because of those increased feelings of connection, it makes us more inclined to do good for the world. Joy compounds joy. Joy brings out more joy in our bodies, our minds, our relationships. and in the world. So yes, joy is good, surprise, but it's also good for you and good for the world. So how do we get our hands on it, especially in long, dark days with somber news all around and threats abounding? How do we even open to joy, let alone experience it deeply? Joy is life-giving, but it's not always easy to access or remember. Our brains are naturally wired to hold on to negative experiences and, unfortunately, to let go of more pleasurable ones. This evolutionary design helped us hold on to memories of experiences that might cause us danger again in the future so that we could avoid that danger. Joyful experiences tend to be less dangerous, so when we remember them, we store them simply in our standard memory systems. Those memory systems release much of what happens. Rick Hanson, a psychologist who wrote the 2010 book, Buddha's Brain, about the neuroscience of happiness, says that we can train our brains to counter this natural tendency towards negativity and hold on to the joy we experience. Hanson writes that our negative experiences get stored in what's called our implicit memory bank, which is different than our standard memory bank. The implicit memory bank isn't necessarily about specific memories, but rather it holds a feeling sense, the feeling of what it is to be alive. As negative memories accumulate in that sort of implicit memory bank, they trend our feeling of what it means to be alive towards the negative. Hanson advises us to counter that by intentionally taking in joyful memories and storing them more deeply within ourselves. He says that the first step towards doing this kind of joyful implicit memory bank storage is really noticing joyful moments in your life rather than ignoring them or just letting them pass by. You can do this by just bringing your attention to the good stuff, whether it's a sunset or the snow falling, like in our Time for All Ages story this morning, or in the frogs croaking their evening song, like the poem by Kinnell. Just noticing the thing that brings you joy. And then the second step is to take the joy in, to really bask in the experience of the sunset or the snow or the frogs. Hanson says that 20 or 30 seconds of basking is plenty. Usually we only experience pleasure for a couple of seconds. To get up to pleasure banking, that place where we can incorporate joy into our sense of how it feels to be alive, we only need to increase our awareness of it to half a minute. Half a minute, a few times a day, very doable, right? That's enough to start developing the neural structures in our brains that will support more joy. By bringing our attention to joy and then basking in it, we're increasing the number and the thickness of our brain's neural pathways to joy, which increases the speed and ease with which we will access joy in the future. Because our brains have what's called plasticity, we can change them through practice, through intention. We create and maintain neural pathways through our thoughts, and we can change those pathways through changing our habitual thoughts. We can deliberately expose ourselves to the things we know bring us joy, and then we can store that joy in ourselves by paying attention to it and deliberately basking in it when it comes. Increasing our own joy in this way is not selfish. Joy ripples out. Human beings' brains mirror the feelings of the people around us through what are called mirror neurons. Indeed, the more we are in touch with our own feelings and experiences, the more likely we are to pick up the feelings of those around us. It happens through a part of the brain that's called the insula. The insula tracks the internal state of the body. So anytime you pay attention to the internal state of your body, whether that's in meditation or through playing soccer or through very attentive exercise, you're working your insula and it thickens just like a muscle. You build it up by sending more neurons there, creating more neural pathways. These pathways work for you. They work for your connections with your internal state, but they also work for other people. They make you more empathetic. The thicker your insula is, the more attentive you are to what's going on around you as well. And you develop mirror neurons. So through attention to your internal state, you increase your connection, not just to yourself, but also to others. And this makes you more empathetic. The more empathetic we all become, the more likely we are to do good in the world, to help other people, whether that be in an immediate interpersonal sense or through justice work. So joy work, attention to our internal state and deliberately cultivating joy through practice brings more joy into the world for everyone. It helps make the world a better place. In a letter to her editor and friend, the Unitarian minister, T.W. Higginson, Emily Dickinson advised Higginson to, quote, find ecstasy in life. The mere sense of living is joy enough. Dickinson found joy in the sense of living. She had joy in her implicit memory bank. She found ways to exalt the living world and to immerse herself in the joy of daily life's beauty and its mystery. In one of her poems, Dickinson wrote, I'll tell you how the sun rose, a ribbon at a time. The steeples swam in amethyst, the news like squirrels ran. The hills untied their bonnets, the bobolinks begun. Then I said softly to myself, that must have been the sun. But how he set, I know not. There seemed a purple stile that little yellow boys and girls were climbing all the while, till when they reached the other side, a dominie in gray put gently up the evening bars and led the flock away. What brings you joy? How can you immerse yourself in it? Is it beauty, nature, life's mystery like Dickinson and Emerson and so many others? Is it music and dance, that beautiful music brought to us by Anne Heaton, the movement of your body or a score that makes your heart swell? Maybe it's laughing with friends or family, comedy or just life's foibles that brings you joy, the music of the vibration of joy in the body. Maybe it's creative play, making, or imagining, or running, jumping, climbing. Take a moment now and picture a little piece of something that brings you joy. Hold it there in your mind. Whatever that joyful thing is, feel it. Feel the pleasure. And bring it into yourself. Let it settle deep within you. Imagine the joy weaving into you, becoming a part of who you are. Imagine storing it in your sense of being alive. This joy that you know is part of what you know about being alive. Joy contains within it the promise of a new world. Even in the hardest of times, in the darkest night, the longest siege, the never-ending pandemic, joy contains the seed of tomorrow. It shows us now in our very bodies what is possible. Laughter, music, lightness, connection, a film festival, hope. With joy, we can feel right now the world we dream of. It can nourish us for the journey, give us the strength to keep working towards that world that we dream of. So dive deep. Dive deep into the joy that you experience. Dive deep into the feeling that heaven and nature sing. Scoop it up and just pour it over your hurting heart. Immerse yourself in its depths and let it echo out through your life, building up your neurons and mirror neurons and your loved ones, repeating and repeating and repeating the sounding joy. May it be so. And amen. Our closing words today are a poem from Nayyirah Waheed's 2013 book of poetry entitled Salt. Do not choose the lesser life. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Choose the life that is yours. The life that is seducing your lungs, that is dripping down your chin. May it be so, and amen.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah,